welcome to another edition of the 1% Better podcast with your host, Rob O'Donoghue.
Hello there. Welcome to this special-ish episode of 1% Better. Why is it special? So, last year I launched a podcast in my second year of podcasting called The 864. It was and is a shorter podcast of around 15 minutes. It's called 864 because that actually is 14 minutes 24 seconds, which is 1% of 24 hours, 1% of your day. And the kind of crazy logic behind all of this was to create a shorter podcast based on feedback I've got from people as they really enjoyed listening to the long form interviews, but they felt sometimes a shorter one might be just as good and allowed them to hear it in full without having to come back to it halfway through the week if they forgot and that sort of thing. So I listen to people. I tend to try and do that, take feedback on board, and came up with the idea of the 864. And we kicked it off last summer and released a bunch of episodes over the next few months. And in truth, it worked really well in most parts. In some, it didn't. And again, like a lot of this is an experiment to try and figuring out the best way to do it. One of the lessons I learned was that putting it on its own separate channel, which is the 864 channel, turned into not a bit of a nightmare or anything, but just extra work because I had to release it on that and build up an audience of following on that. That was different. Getting people listening from the 1% subscribers to the 864 wasn't straightforward. And in general, it just took a little bit more effort than I expected. Even though it was shorter interviews, I thought that would mean I'd be able to get them done quicker, less editing, etc. But in all, it didn't take a whole lot different, especially when you're putting it out and sharing it on the socials. All that stuff still takes the same time. So it was a really good learning from that point of view. And I was able to attract some really high-profile guests from all over the place. And I think there was something in that as well, as looking at shorter episodes, shorter interviews. Some folks are more likely to sign up for it. So there are just some lessons I've learned. So the concept was right. And I was trying to figure out how best to kind of maybe relaunch it this year. And I suppose now coming into the end of the summer and into the latter part of the year, I said, why not now? Why not now just to start rolling them out again? So I've decided to do that, but this time out on the 1% Better podcast channel, this one you're listening to, and see where we go from there. So again, it's just the same sort of interview, but a lesser extent of detail. So tend to just talk about one or two specific focus areas for the 15 or so minutes instead of the hour long going into the backstory, getting deeper into conversation. And again, I personally prefer those longer form ones just because of the depth that you can go and you're not under any kind of time constraints and all of that stuff. So this episode is an 864 from last year. You will hear a little bit of a musical intro for the 864. I'll leave that in for this one, might take it out for future ones. And you'll hear the interview with a very high-profile rugby player. I'll talk about him in a second. The format I was also using was towards the end to try and do some Q&A, rapid fire, and try and tie it up around the 15-minute mark. Another angle or another element of joking I received last year, I suppose, was that none of them ever really landed on the 14.5 minute or so. Tended to go over just because I wanted to get a little bit more out of them. And one or two actually went massively over. One I did with Rosanna Arquette, which will come out in a few weeks again, went to 30 minutes, I think. But it's not every day I get to talk to somebody in Hollywood from a great line of actors and actresses, and I wanted to keep that one going. So, as I said, probably numerous times, it was an experiment. It still is. Everything I'm doing here is kind of experimenting. A lot of it is working out really well, and some of it isn't, and then I'll just try and see how to tweak that and move it along. So, we will go into the 864, or what I'm trying to come up with a term. It'll still be called 864 because that's the name of it, but it's kind of 1% light, perhaps. Somebody mentioned going with that. Maybe you can come up with a better term for me, or maybe just the 864 on 1% better works. Hopefully all that context helps you. This time last year, when I released it, I have had probably half the amount of listeners than I do now, and that's another reason for relaunching or launching it, because so many new folks are on board, never even heard of the 864 before, so it's all new to them. And this one is with rugby legend from New Zealand, but also very well known in Ireland. His name is Isa Nacewa, and we have a really interesting chat. He was over in Ireland at the time. We had a quick early morning call, and things like mindset, positivity, meditation, really interesting topics that I enjoyed, and some good advice that he shares. So I'll leave it there. As always, please let me know what you think of this. If it's the first time you heard it, I'd love to hear your feedback. If you have listened to these before, hopefully a second time around something else sticks, or you remember something you didn't the first time around. Do leave a rating on iTunes, Apple Podcasts. You can leave ratings, reviews. You can give me a stars, all of that good stuff. I know I knock the Apple Podcasts and the charts because you can. I've proven recently in a kind of an experiment there that I haven't shared much about yet. You can game them. You can get to the top in other countries illegitimately, and that's kind of funny. But you can. And the way I hope to do it is just keep being authentic and, asking folks for subscriptions and following and likes and all of that good stuff if you like the podcast, because that'll help with the rating. There's no doubt when you're higher up, you'll get seen by new folks. They might enjoy it. On that note, I did get high up in the Mongolian iTunes charts this week, not gamed. So whoever that one person probably over there was listening, hopefully you're listening to this one. Drop me an email. Love to hear from you. Hopefully you can understand what I'm talking about, and my English is legible. Probably not good if you're learning English, but there you go. Tell a friend about the podcast. Follow us on social media at Rob of the Green, pretty much on all of them. I set up a Slack group. Slack is a collaboration tool, and my goal of that is to get folks that listen to the podcast to communicate with each other on a regular basis, much more so than Facebook and other social media platforms. There's a link on the website. You can join that for free. Trying to get folks on board to sign up for some August challenges and maybe challenge yourselves to improve in certain areas. It's there. And email rob@robofthegreen.ie. That's always a good way to get in touch. Finally, and I know this is a long intro, but I'm entitled to it because it's setting up the new episode. That show was, let me clarify that, 1% Better has been nominated for awards at the People's Choice Awards for podcasting, and it'd be really cool if it got one of those. I'd say it's in two categories: the overall People's Choice, which has probably 100, 200 podcasts in there, or the education category, so less than that, so probably more of a chance to win there. And really it's just about folks clicking on the link on the front page, homepage of the website, where it says Podcasters Choice Awards vote. Then you just sign in and drop down on either of those categories to 1% Better. Good thing about being 1% Better, number one is up near the top of the drop down. And vote. Closing date 31st of July. So if you did like the show, wanted it to get a bit more exposure, it would be cool for you to take a minute to at least do that, if none of the other stuff. And for the next 15 or so minutes, I'm going to let you enjoy the conversation with Isa Nacewa from the 864 from last year, and lots more of these to come over the coming weeks. But don't worry, the full 1% Better interviews are continuing, and I'll have one out next week, interviewing a good few at the moment, building a nice backlog, and some cool ones coming up. There you go. Enjoy the conversation with Isa. Thanks so much, and good luck.
This is the 864 podcast from Rob of the Green, providing you with some insights, ideas, and actionable takeaways in just 864 seconds, or 1% of your day, with the explicit goal of making you get a little better, even if it's just 1%. Here's your host, Rob O'Donoghue. Let's do this.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the 864 podcast, and I always say this at the start, but I really mean it this time. This is a really special one for me and for the show. I am delighted to introduce Isa Nacewa to the podcast. Isa, welcome on to the 864.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to me and having a chat today.
No, it's great to grab you while you're back in Ireland for a few days, so it worked out well. How long are you here for? You're here for, is it, I was checking online, is there kind of testimonial stuff going on for you?
Yep, so I've got a testimonial dinner this evening, Wednesday, but it's an in and out flight. I had very tight work and starting a new job, finishing a bit of Sky Sports stuff in New Zealand. So I literally arrived on Sunday, and I'm out of here on Thursday afternoon. I wish I could stay longer, but for this trip, it's a bit of an in and out job.
Very good. And just before we were starting the online or recording, we were just talking a little bit about getting up early and morning routines. So it was one of my questions. Maybe we go straight to that one. What is your typical morning routine that kind of gets you going, gets you into, I suppose, a flow state for the day?
Yeah, so my morning is critical for me. And I've always been a morning person, probably ever since I was young, where I think my dad used to get me up and do a paper run very early, but I've always been a morning person, and I'm always sort of most productive. Me and my wife work as a good team because she's not a morning person, and she functions best in the evenings when I'm getting tired. But even as a rugby player, I always like to get up early, and I have my routine of whatever time it is. At the moment, it's 5 to 6 because I've started a new job and I have to get out of the house a little bit earlier. But I have this routine around waking up, having my Barocca, having my granola, and having my 2 Nespresso coffees, and it's just my routine. And it's continued on since my rugby days here in Dublin, and especially over the last 3 years. I used to get up that little bit earlier because I like to eat a little bit earlier. And there was a time where mindfulness was tucked into my routine in the morning, only for 5 minutes. And that was the only way I felt I could set myself up for the day. I'm slowly learning what routine post-rugby is like, but I've started one again, just knowing that I was starting a new job, that I needed to be out of the house early for living a little bit further away. I've gradually got back into it, so I'm feeling more comfortable, and it just sets me up nicely for the day. Yeah,
it's very interesting that, when you hear from sports professionals that then all of a sudden change their routine, going from very detailed, laid out patterns on training and that, and then go into a world where it's post-rugby, post-sport, and there's that bit of maybe a gap of what to do with yourself. You notice things not feeling right?
Yeah, I don't know if it was not feeling right. It's just that I think you need that time. I think that you need that time post-rugby to get away from it all. Some people dive straight in to work through any certain circumstance, and some people have to. And I think it's, if you have the option to take a bit of time and to break routine, I think it's a good way to mentally prepare and mentally clear your head. So I had the good part of 3 months off after finishing rugby, but it only over time, and after the novelty wore off, and after I probably got on my wife's nerves a bit, I think I realized that I needed to find my routine again, and a new one that suited me. So it just made me, I've been institutionalized in rugby for 15 years, where I've been told what to do and what to wear and where to be for 15 years. So I think that morning routine is an important way in helping transition out of rugby and into your next career.
And I think having it for whatever you do helps, I guess, set you up for the day, as you said. So the mental aspect of everything you do back in the rugby days, but even maybe growing up, was there a focus on kind of mentality as well as just physicality always, or where did that come from, do you think?
That it dominated 50% of my week, the mental side of the game, and your mental capacity and training and how you applied yourself. And I probably stumbled onto it pretty early, sort of way back around 2007 when Joe Schmidt was at the Blues with me. And then through experience and age, you find what works for you. What works for a whole team might not necessarily work for you, but you stumble across things. And when you do readings and research, I think over time you generate your own sort of mindset and philosophy, whether that's based on someone else's or it's purely your own. So I definitely developed my own quite early, and probably tweaked it in an evolution of mindset over time. And circumstance such as kids, getting married, all those things influence your mindset, and how you want to be a champion, how you want to be perceived. So yeah, I developed mine pretty early, but it was more prevalent for me and stronger in the sort of my time here at Leinster than it probably was in New Zealand.
When you retired in 2013, the first time round, how big of a shock to the system was that? And what role did your mindset and mental strength have to play in coming to terms with it?
So I look back at the time when I retired and I was comfortable with my decision. The decision was to move home. And I didn't think I was going to be playing rugby again. So at that time, my mindset was fine and healthy and positive because I knew I was walking into a new challenge in life. Plus, I didn't want to play for anyone else but Leinster at the time. So when I said at the time I was retiring a Leinster player, I think there was probably a lot of people out there that thought that wasn't true. But I always knew in my mind I didn't want to play for anyone else. So at the time, I was positive about starting life, starting a new career. So at the time, it was the right decision for us, and my mental strength was right. You just got to get on with it. You tackled, you attacked in your rugby career. Now get out and attack the next part of your life. And that was my mindset at the time.
And you went into a role after that, doing the research with the Auckland Blues as kind of a mental skills coach, talking about discipline and identifying attributes. I'm just picking up on as well what you said, like your mindset and how you developed an approach there for you. What works for you may not work for others. How did you find the challenge of being able to adapt and tweak mindset approaches for different players when you were in that role? What worked out there?
Yeah, it was an absolute learning curve for me. I wasn't really given a structure, which in hindsight probably wasn't a good thing. But what I found, I was in the role for 2 seasons, maybe the space of 20 months, and I realized very quickly what worked for me was not going to work in the organization that I was in due to unforeseen circumstances and the people involved. But in saying that, I had to adapt from the first season to the second and to say, what's really going to work for the individual. And that's what I focused on. I focused on the individual rather than the team because it was a far more positive experience for the player and probably benefited the player more. And I also learned at the time that if you have no interest in it, you're not going to work on it. If you have no interest in the mental side of the game, if you don't think it's going to work, then it isn't going to work. So these are sort of real sharp learning curves that I learned over especially the first 9 months in the role. And then leading into the second campaign before coming back here, I found, what worked for certain athletes. And I just focused on the positive and did that. And from all the feedback that I probably got, and I still stay in contact with quite a few of those players, it benefited them at that time of their career.
And as you were going through that process, were you documenting the learnings on a daily, monthly basis? How were you reflecting on it so that you could actually, I suppose, improve yourself as you go forward?
I really was. It's so strange how, I figured out what had worked for me. I figured out all the other people that influenced me on my time here at Leinster and took that back. And it definitely gave me a way different perspective when I had decided to come back to Leinster. And in particular, like what really mattered, like why did you play the game? Why why do you want to be here? What decisions do you have to make that aren't always popular for the right reasons? So by the time I got back to Leinster in 2015, 2 years later, I was a completely different person than when I left.
Sounds like a great experience, even though maybe at the time sometimes you don't realise how much you're learning and how much value it'll bring further down the road. It seems to have been the case. I like asking the question around the voice inside the head to various guests, because there's certainly one in mine, and it's jumping up and down a lot of the time, shouting at me. I'm used to it. But how do you deal with that kind of negative self-talk? Is that something that you've had to develop over the years as well, or has there been approaches to befriend it?
Yeah, definitely. And the negative self-talk in my head has never been very strong. I'm a very positive person. I believe in the law of attraction. I believe that you can quiet that voice, and it's never been. I've always been pretty good at parking mistakes, parking negative self-talk, and just leaving it alone and squashing that voice. And I can probably pick out sort of 2 games in my career that have probably got the better of me. And, it didn't mean that I had a terrible game. It's just 2 games in particular that it sort of jumped out and started talking. It wouldn't go away. But as you grow in your career and get more experienced, you definitely figure out techniques to quiet that voice. But you've got to challenge yourself at the same time. And I think I can put myself in situations in training, on the training field, where you have a choice if you want to push yourself. You have a choice if you want to wake up in the morning and be in a good mood. And I think a lot of this probably came from, having patience with my children and my kids, and understanding that when I come home, they have no interest in if I had a bad day of training or if I had a bad game. They just want to see their dad first and foremost. So a lot of the negative talk I learned to deal with pretty well, to be honest.
I think that negative self-talk comes up more when we have too much time to actually pay attention and too much time to dwell on it.
I 100% believe that, because I really encourage people to have a positive distraction, and that's just something that's rolled off my tongue a good few times over the last 5 years. And a lot of guys have study, a lot of guys are training to do something, and it's a really, really good distraction from rugby where you just don't have to think about it. And I think it's the guys that are bored and have too much time on their hands that they probably struggle with it a bit more. But if you can leave rugby where it is and focus on something else, it takes your mind off it, which obviously is a good thing in the long run.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's one of the reasons why I do this, to kind of keep me active outside of the day job as well. Maybe 1 or 2 final ones to wrap up. He said, you mentioned meditation as well early on, and that's something I've got into the last 3 or 4 years and have it as my morning routine. It's a mandatory foundation, effectively. That's something that was always in your life, or where did that come in and go out? I'm just fascinated at that whole topic.
Yeah, It was massively important for me over the last 3 seasons here at Leinster, and maybe that's the first time I retired. I was probably doing quite a lot of research around meditation and mindfulness. I have done a lot of yoga over my career, even in my time at playing rugby in New Zealand and my early days in Leinster. So, as I say, it was probably just one of those philosophies that has evolved, and you found what worked for you. But mindfulness is always a massive part of my day. And we even started, running a few classes at Leinster over the last 12 months, and it's a real positive and benefit, and can, if you want to do it though, it's something you can't force on someone. But if they find it beneficial in their daily lives or in their performance out on the field, then of course you're going to do a bit more of it. So once again, I probably stumbled across it through research and then just made it part of my daily habit.
Very good. Yeah, I think the theme jumping up there, as you mentioned, is people have to want things, and a lot of the time it's a question of timing, I guess, for certain people just to stumble across things, and it's the right time, right place, and they can throw themselves into it.
Yep.
I totally agree. We'll wrap it up with just one question around maybe a book that you've read over the last while that has influenced you positively in some way, that you took something from. Anyone you can recommend that I normally put up on the website afterwards?
Yeah, so one of my great reads, I've had a couple. One would be The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari.
Yeah,
is that the name of the book?
It is. I have it here. I'm looking at it. Yeah, it's Sharma, I think is the guy's name. So
yep, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. It's a great read. It's not some people's cup of tea, but it definitely rang bells in my head. But also Pete Carroll, Win Forever, is a Seattle Seahawks NFL head coach, and his philosophy of win forever it sort of just struck chords with me, because it was probably a way that I was thinking already. So of course I read the book and was like, wow, this is cool. So I'd often go back and read that. When you go down the road of win forever, it's hard to get out of it. And that's just daily life and daily habits. So it's a great philosophy, and one that I really agree with. But those two books, I'd often probably read them once a year, and it just keeps me on my toes.
Very good. I like the fact that you go back and reread these things, because there's sometimes so much good stuff in them and we never go back to them afterwards. I might give you a quick book recommendation or a question to see if you've ever read it. I'm reading it at the moment, and it kind of ties into some of the stuff we talked about around yoga and meditation. Have you heard of Autobiography of a Yogi?
I have heard of it. I think I probably have it on my Amazon watch list and have had for a while. Yeah. But the thing with, I got to a point probably the start of last season. I'd often try and read a good few books in the off season, and I had 4 or 5 books that I still haven't got through. Stuart Lancaster gave me a good few books, so it's probably definitely on my list and something I'll look forward to. Do
check it out. You might enjoy it. Look, that was brilliant. Thanks so much for taking the 15 plus minutes. I think I stole an extra 1 or 2 there towards the end, but it was great conversation. Thanks again. I hope you enjoy the next 24 hours in the country before you head back, and looking forward to sharing this one. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Rob. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
So this is the outro of the podcast, guys. You got to the end, and that is great. Please hang in here for another couple of minutes. I know most people won't, but maybe there's something here of interest, so check this out. First off, thanks so much for listening to this one, as well as maybe the 100 or so that's gone before it. Why not check them out if you haven't already? There's lots of good stuff in there. The whole podcasting journey for me has been a huge learning, and I'm trying to help you guys learn and improve as well. So much has changed over the last few years since I started it. I've really realised lots of the goals that I put out there, and then realised so many unexpected benefits as well. And I think anytime you take on action towards a goal, you're going to pick up lots of things that you didn't expect along the way, and hopefully they're good things. In this particular episode, was there any 1 or 2 things that jumped out? Maybe you could take a pen and paper out right now, because this is something that you might think of during the episode but never do. Do it now. Take it out. Write down a goal that you're going to set yourself as a result of something you learned from this episode. Put a plan in place and then work towards it, applying yourself deliberately over time. Take ownership, build a habit, improve, get 1% better, share accountability with somebody you know in a buddy system, and learn and grow and improve. That's what it's all about. That's my, hopefully, inspirational piece done. Other areas to note: check out the website robofthegreen.ie. You can consume everything there for free. There is obviously the podcast, there's video, 1 Minute Monday clips, there's articles, not enough, but I'd like to put more there. If you're interested in putting one there, let me know. And there's a Get Better app page, which I'm starting to add new content to over time. There's a feedback page if you want to email me, rob@robofthegreen.ie instead. But it's all about trying to engage you and get you to a place of improvement. So I'm open to feedback. As I said, ways you can help me is by following me on the socials. @robofthegreen.ie is the website, or @robofthegreen on all the social platforms. Subscribe to the podcast on any of the apps that you might listen to it on. Talk about it. tell a friend about it, tell your family members about it, share some of the ideas, not only to your friends, but to me. Is there anything I can improve upon? Sign up to the newsletter, that's there as well. I'm experimenting again with a group called Slack, Rob of the Green on Slack. This is really for a shared accountability environment and sharing ideas. You can sign up to that on the website as well. All of this is obviously all free, but there is also an option where you could subscribe to my Patreon site and make a small donation for the content that we do. It's there. It's totally up to you. Everything that is coming in through that or could come in through that will go into making the podcast better. So, to close, I am always trying to improve and get better. Change is difficult, I know that, but it's all about taking the first step. Learning something, applying yourself, moving forward. You can do this. I've been able to improve, pushing myself outside the comfort zone, learning, and I think if I can do it, so can you. Don't overreach, don't set yourself unrealistic goals. 1% at a time is enough, but it's all about starting, and that will bring you on your pursuit of betterness to a great place. Thanks for sticking to the very end. Talk to you next time and take care. Good luck.